And we are live. How's everyone doing today? So I think this is our 5th live stream now. And today we got a pretty good schedule for you. We're going to do another review of The Bad Batch. And then we're going to address some different news topics that have been going on with Lucasfilm and Star Wars lately. I'm sure you've heard by now, but Dave Filoni just recently got promoted. And there's always been rumors, but rumors have resurfaced that Kathleen Kennedy could be on her way out. So we're going to look at a bunch of different articles talking about this, and we are going to give our thoughts on them. So we'll give the chat a quick second to populate before we start with that. I'm going to share the link to the stream to a couple places. I'm sure you guys, and our brother, of course, is the first to say hello. Hey, John, do you notice my new decoration right there? I picked him up in Walmart today, just on an impulse buy. Why not? And let's see, one other thing I gotta do.
I think quite as the chat is kind of making their way to the streams, feel free to let us know how your day's going. Anything being special happened today, or you just want to say hey, like our brother said.
All right, all the links are sent out, all the housekeeping stuff is done, so let's get into it. So let's start off with talking about The Bad Batch. So this is the 4th episode now.
Yep, and spoilers ahead.
Yes, spoilers ahead. Overall, I think this was another okay episode, but I think this series is following the same sort of trend that the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian did, where the first 2 or 3 episodes are really, really good, but then they kind of, and really, really interesting, but then they kind of start to dip a little bit in the middle of the season only to ramp right back up in the end. And I think this episode, for me at least, is the continuation of that trend. I thought the first 2 episodes were great. I thought the 3rd episode was great, but slightly less so. And then this one, I thought was good to meh. And then Jonathan says, I watched the first episode of Bad Batch. It was cool. I enjoyed it. Well, we're glad you enjoyed it, John. Now watch the other 3. So, Michael, what did you think of this episode overall?
Well, it wasn't as good as the first one, if we're being 100% honest. But then again, that wouldn't be really fair to try to compare it to the first episode, just because we all knew what was going to happen on the first episode anyways.
Exactly. Not to mention the first episode was just basically longer. It was basically a movie, whereas this is just a standard TV episode. So, kind of an unfair advantage there. But even still, I really don't have much to complain about from this episode. I think it's cool that we get to see Fennec Shand and see what her life was like before the timeline of The Mandalorian. So, just a quick background for what happened in this episode. The Bad Batch and Omega they land on this planet and have to go into town for supplies. And they also have to get their ship fixed. So while Wrecker and Tech fix the ship, Echo, disguised pretty well actually as a droid, Hunter and Omega go into the town, and meanwhile someone's been following them. A bounty hunter, that of course Fennec Shand, and she tries to beguile Omega into following her, so that she can complete her job. But of course, Hunter catches on what's going on, and a fight breaks out, basically, throughout the rest of the episode. A big fight and chase. Oh, and by the way, for those that are wondering what the background noise is, that's on Michael, and that's our big dog Sam. See if you can get him on camera, Mike.
Come here, Sam. Get over here, big.
This guy's a big dog.
Yeah, come here. Come here. Come on. Come on. Come here. I know you're camera shy. Come on. Come on. Come on.
Camera shy and Sam has never been a thing.
I don't know about that. All right. Here he is.
Yep, that is Sam.
Big buddy.
He is our giant schnauzer. He is 5 now, right?
Yeah, I want to say he's 5 right now.
Yeah, and he's a good boy. But for some reason, he's being camera shy right now, which is never a thing because we filmed him doing tricks. So I don't know what his problem is.
Maybe he just knows and the FBI is after him or something like that. All right, well, continue on with the episode.
So back to the episode. One of the very interesting things that I think in this episode was at the very end, where we find out that Fennec Shand really isn't working alone. She was hired by someone to get Omega. So I think the safest bet here is that Fennec Shand was hired by the Kaminoans to bring Omega back to Kamino.
Mm-hmm.
But what if there was a little bit more to it than that? What if Fennec Shand was trying to find Omega at the request of Boba Fett, who was hired by the Kaminoans to find Omega and bring her back?
This would actually be very interesting, just because I'm not really sure exactly how old Boba Fett would be. I want to say he'd probably be not exactly like 19 years.
Yeah, he'd be somewhere in his teens, I'd think.
Yeah, just because I do believe, but he wouldn't be like obviously 12 years old, because there was a deleted scene, from the unreleased 7th season of Clone Wars where he did wear his father's armor. Yes, so he's at least. So one thing we know for sure is that he's at least old enough to try to wear it. Not saying it would fit properly, but it's possible.
Right. And I just had a thought, like, right now, what if they take that deleted scene, finish it, and put it into the Bad Batch? Because that would tie up not just the loose end of seeing how Boba Fett got the dent in his helmet, but also seeing basically the end of Cad Bane.
Yeah.
Because that deleted scene basically showed Cad Bane's death. He challenges Boba Fett to a old-fashioned quick draw duel, and Boba Fett wins and kills him. But, Cad Bane still gets the draw and shoots Boba Fett in the helmet, putting the dent in there.
Yeah.
So I think it would be cool if they somehow recycled that scene and put it into the Bad Batch. Though how they would do that and fit it into the rest of the story, I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm honestly not entirely sure if basically recreating that scene would be the best thing, just because a lot of fans would want Cad Bane to appear in more later projects like the Obi-Wan show, or sometime after the Fall of the Empire where he shows up. But anyways, my take on this scene is that I think it's good that they don't immediately show a hologram of who Fennec Shand was hired by, or a big reveal, basically.
Exactly.
Just because at this point, we can pretty much tell that there is a big bad other than Palpatine, Tarkin, and all of those people would pretty much be easy go-tos for who hired Fennec.
Exactly.
But obviously they're not going to say who it is, because, like you said, PJ, it could be somebody else like Boba Fett.
Yeah. One of the things I would say that I was not that big a fan of in this episode was no Crosshair, because Crosshair, admittedly for me, is the most interesting and unpredictable character of this show,
Mm-hmm.
because we know that currently he is fully under the influence of the inhibitor chip, but we also got teases, I would say, in the last episode of maybe he's starting to regret what the chip is doing to him, siding with the Empire, and he misses being with his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I would have wanted wanted to see a little bit more of that in this episode, but I suppose they're saving that for a future episode.
Yeah, that's possible.
Though I will say, though, they can't put stuff off like this too long, because the way I understand it, this show is basically a one season show of only 16 episodes. Now, granted, we're only 4 down out of 16, but still, that's a quarter of the way through.
Yeah,
So, you know, I'm not saying rush, but at the same time, don't make every episode seem like filler.
yeah,
And that's like that kind of, I would say, is my biggest complaint with this episode compared to the other 3, especially the first 2. This episode seemed kind of fillerish.
yeah. But I would say it did at least serve the purpose of introducing one of the most hyped characters and in this series, being Fennec Shan, just because she did make her appearance in the trailer, and obviously, she's pretty much well loved by the fan base ever since she made an appearance in The Mandalorian.
Yeah,
Not
I
as
mean,
well liked as some others, but still, she's well respected.
yeah, I like her character. Okay, she's not my favorite character by any means, but I don't hate her.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about where this where they could possibly go from here with the show. We know that we're going to see Captain Rex at some point. Do you think they're going to do that in the next episode, or do you think we're going to have to wait a couple episodes for that?
Personally, I believe that it would be smarter for them to wait a few episodes just because you don't want to suddenly pull a whole lot of characters so early. Otherwise, it's just going to be more characters and less story, where the audience is more focused on, oh, Captain Rex is here, rather than what's actually going on. So I believe it's smarter for them just to wait it out, develop more story arcs through Crosshair, Tarkin, the Kaminoans, obviously the crew.
Okay,
So,
that makes
but
sense.
so I do think that they need to build up to that a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Okay. Another thing that they started in the last episode but didn't seem to carry over in this one was um the idea that Wrecker got hit in the head on the same side as where the inhibitor chip is, and at first was seemingly complaining of a headache where he barely, feels. I mean, yeah, he'll get shot, but he shrugs it off. And here he is complaining of a headache after hitting his head on his restraints on the same side as the inhibitor chip. And seemingly in this episode, you would have never known had you skipped the last one. So I'm surprised we didn't even get like the tiniest little hint that something's going on with that. But I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
another thing that they're kind of letting slow burn over several episodes.
Yeah.
So anything else to talk about with this episode?
Well, let's see. Well, we can also kind of talk about like why exactly Fennec would be tracking Omega, and pretty much what her purpose in this.
Like
Because
I like I said, I'm almost certain that she has been hired by Lama Su and Nala Se of Camino
mhm,
to bring Omega back to, as they said in the third episode, potentially use her to create this superior clone that will secure their relationship with the Empire.
Yeah.
So,
but then
so
again,
that's what I think is going on there.
they also said that this superior clone would need to be from a direct source, and so Omega, as we know, is a female clone to Jango Fett, and or at least that's my opinion so far. Probably not
Yeah,
as clear.
that is kind of the way that I've been leaning with this too. But at the same time, I think there's still a little bit of doubt there.
Yeah. Well, let's just assume that she is
Right.
for a minute, because if that was the case, then why would they want Omega just because it's kind of like how we described in one of our previous episodes, a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. Or
Exactly.
basically, yeah, it's my opinion that Omega is a female clone, just because they must have stretched far too thin to be able to use the male DNA of Django, and so they could only work with the X chromosomes of his DNA. Which, of course, if you take genetics and biology, you'll learn more about this. But basically, what I'm talking about is that the Y chromosome is what it makes up the male genotype, and the X chromosome is female. So what I'm basically saying is that it's possible that they ran out of the Y chromosome, and so instead they had to make a female clone based on the remaining X chromosomes, kind of like X-23 from X-Men, who was technically the, the clone of Wolverine to Hina, but she was female because they could only use the X chromosomes to make her.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
so that's like my personal opinion, and I think that's like why it wouldn't be the case. But of course, we don't know for sure until they explicitly say or kind of allude to why.
Which I think they will in
Yeah,
perhaps a later episode.
yeah.
We're going to learn more about her at some point, but um, right now I think Omega is in the same position as right there. Basically, right now, if you remember, in the first couple of episodes of The Mandalorian, with the exception of Mando having to save Grogu from the Imperial officer and that cloning doctor in the third episode, he was just kind of along for the ride. And we really didn't start to learn more about him until number one, the last two or last one and a half, I say, episodes of season one, where we
Mm-hmm.
learn exactly why that, where we learn exactly why the Empire wants Grogu. And then of course we find out a little bit more in season 2 that they specifically want his blood. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the situation I think we're in right now with Omega. Where right now, because we don't know much about her, nor are they sharing much about her, it gives off the perception that right now she's just along for the ride. But we know that episode is coming where they have some form of exposition that explains exactly what her purpose is. And also,
Yeah.
quick shout out to the Catman, aka Dee Myers. Thank you for joining us, and to everyone else joining us. If you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe. So I think that pretty much covers everything we were talking about for the Bad Batch. And also, Michael, I did get your message that you just sent me.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, let's move now into talking about Dave Filoni. And I'm going to bring up an article now. This is
Mm-hmm.
off Variety. So this article says The Mandalorian EP Dave Filoni's new job at Lucasfilm isn't actually new, but fans on Twitter got excited anyway. So let's establish a little bit of history before we start looking at this article. So the other day, Thursday, was hanging out with our friend Ian, and I just randomly happened to check Twitter, and I saw a whole bunch of tweets from various other members of the Star Wars YouTube community that I follow saying stuff like this. Dave Filoni was just promoted to executive creative director at Lucasfilm. I believe he just has more oversight over all the stuff they're doing now. Dave Filoni becoming executive creative director is the best thing that could happen to Star Wars right now. And this led me to
Yeah.
dig deeper and deeper. And yes, it indeed turns out that Dave Filoni is now executive creative director.
All right,
Now, on the
EJ.
surface, oh, you
Yeah.
were saying something?
Yeah. I just have a little sound effect just to put in context of what this means for us.
Go ahead, make. Good one. I was a little bit worried there you were going to play something copyrighted.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But
So, on the surface, that is cool. But digging into it, there's a little bit more to it. First, I'm going to take down this article. We'll come back to it. And I'm going to share the official Lucasfilm website. So this is the official Lucasfilm website, specifically their leadership page. So you can see here's Kathleen Kennedy, the president. We'll talk about her later. Vice president, and then executive vice president of physical production, Mrs. Semgupta. Apologize if I butchered that. And then right here's Dave Filoni. And it says under his name, executive producer and executive creative director. Now, he's not the only one to have this title. There's two other guys that he's listed alongside that have this title. I found him a minute ago. Okay, so here's one of them, Mr. Doug Chiang, Vice President and Executive Creative Director of Star Wars, and then the third guy is, I passed him. Here he is, Mr. John Knoll, Executive Creative Director, Senior Visual Effects Supervisor, ILM. So ILM, by the way, Michael, that's basically the special effects section of Lucasfilm.
yeah.
So Dave Filoni now shares the title Executive Creative Director with those two gentlemen. But if you go back to his section, you'll notice there's no addendum, no asterisk after Executive Creative Director. There's nothing after this that says Executive Creative Director of this specific part, as it did with Mr. John Knoll of, ILM, and with Mr. Doug Chiang of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So this gives me the impression that Dave Filoni is the executive creative director for everything, at least everything Star Wars related.
Mm-hmm.
Now, back to this article we were looking at. We can exit out of that. So, digging a little bit deeper into this, I found out that Dave Filoni actually got promoted to this position back in the summer of 2020. Oh, real quick, shout out to Patrick saying, "Hail, Star Wars guys. Omega has to be a Palpatine clone because of her blonde hair. All other clones have dark hair."
Well,
Wait a minute. I don't think so. Didn't
yeah.
Captain Rex have like really, really, really short blonde hair, at least in the first couple episodes of the Clone Wars, or was he just bald and that was like the shadow of it?
I do think he was bald for that. Now for Omega having blonde hair, that could just be one of two things. Either one, just because the people in Lucasfilm and Dave Filoni just said, "Okay, we're giving her blonde hair. Boom, done it."
Yeah. So,
or her, of course, her blonde hair is actually a recessive of thing that maybe Django must have had with one of his parents possibly being blonde. So, not entirely sure if that were to be 100% of the case, but it's entirely possible. But
and then Patrick says Rex had gray hair. But that doesn't make sense because Rex in the Clone Wars wasn't old. So they had to have genetically Either he dyed his hair gray, which I don't see a military officer doing that, knowing what I know about the military,
Hmm.
or number two, when Rex was created, they somehow went in and changed up his genetics so that he would have gray hair. Or number
Yeah.
three, he got so stressed out he got gray hair.
Yeah.
Like our So yeah. And I don't know what that is, John, but thank you.
YT whatever. I can't read. I can't read
Yeah,
this.
John, I have no idea what that is, John, but thank you for still watching and interacting.
Yeah.
So I think the most likely answer for this is that both in the case of Rex and Omega, when they were being created, the Kaminoans went in, assuming that Omega is a Jango Fett clone. The Kaminoans went in and tweaked her DNA just a little bit, I guess, to give her that blonde hair and change her gender. Same with Rex, minus the gender swapping.
Hmm.
But
All
anyways,
right.
getting back to what we were talking about with Dave Filoni. So when I first heard of this news, I did a little bit more research and found out that Dave Filoni, this is not a new job that he has. He actually got this last year in the summer, but we're only just now finding out about it. And Lucasfilm somehow only just updated their website. So let's read this article real quick. This is from Variety, and it says The Mandalorian EP Dave Filoni's new, in quotations, job at Lucasfilm isn't actually new, but fans on Twitter got excited anyway. The force is strong with Dave Filoni, and so it seems is Twitter. Last summer, Lucasfilm quietly promoted the executive producer and frequent writer and director of The Mandalorian to executive creative director for the entire studio, a rep confirms with Variety. But the company didn't update its website with Filoni's new title until this week, which is when it began to percolate and then explode across Reddit and Twitter as if the promotion had just happened. And we've already covered these tweets, which again, that's how I found out. Even the Mandalorian actors Ming Na Wen and Katie Sackhoff tweeted their congratulations to Filoni. And here is Miss Ming Na Wen, who plays the live action version of Fennec Shand, and I think did her voice too.
Yeah, I think she
Even
did.
even she is wishing Dave Filoni congratulations for his promotion. The excitement is understandable. The 46-year-old has been a fixture at Lucasfilm ever since George Lucas selected him in 2005 to oversee the animated series The Clone Wars, which launched in 2008 and ultimately ran for 7 seasons. Lucas was such an important mentor to Filoni that many fans see the latter as the true heir to the Star Wars mythology, the creative mind who best understands what makes Star Wars work and what doesn't. And I agree with that. After Lucas sold the company to Disney, Filoni created 2 more well-received animated series, Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Resistance. Never seen this one at all. Never seen Star Wars Resistance. And then Jon Favreau tapped him to executive produce The Mandalorian, Lucasfilm's first live-action TV series for Disney+. In December, Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy announced that Filoni and Favreau are executive producing several Mandalorian spin-offs on Disney Plus, including The Book of Boba Fett, which is currently shooting and premiering in December, Ahsoka, starring Rosario Dawson, and Rangers of the New Republic. A third announced spin-off, Rangers of the New Republic, is not currently in active development. Kennedy also said these spin-offs, which all take place within the same timeline, will ultimately culminate in a storytelling event. Filoni's title as executive creative director captures the complicated role of overseeing both individual series and a larger storyline that weaves together several shows. So basically, they're doing something very similar to the MCU, or in TV show terms, the Arrowverse. Given Filoni's galaxy-sized Star Wars expertise, he's also been known to weigh in on other Star Wars projects outside of his direct purview. And then there's another reason that some Star Wars fans rejoiced at the news of Filoni's title of executive creative director. And this is where we start to transition a little bit into our other topic. Kennedy remains a lightning rod for a certain subset of the fandom, and predictions that she is leaving Lucasfilm have become so common they are practically white noise. But as other fans have also noted on Twitter, Kennedy is the one who gave Filoni his promotion, and Disney's leadership has given no indication that Kennedy will be leaving her post anytime soon. Filoni's new position was seen as one of many promotions that are announced internally but not made public, and it appears the company was caught off guard by the enthusiastic response to a standard, if overdue, update on its website. At one point on Thursday, the site was temporarily unavailable. It's all another reminder that with Star Wars fans, it's do or do not, there is no try. So, Michael, what was your immediate reaction to that article?
Well, for one thing, I do feel like that even though that the promotion was not necessarily new, that the reaction to it was pretty well justified, just because it's pretty much Dave Filoni and George Lucas's relationship was pretty much like the Jedi Master and his Padawan, which in this case, he's obviously, it seems like Dave Filoni has received the promotion of Jedi Knight, if we were to continue that analogy. And so, well, I would still argue that maybe there's a little bit more going on, just because it's like you said, there is no asterisk next to Dave Filoni's title, so it could mean a lot of things.
Yeah. So here's what kind of weirds me out with this article. I agree with what they say, that I also think that Dave Filoni absolutely deserves this promotion. I think creatively he is the best thing that we need for Star Wars right now. But this article, especially in the latter half, kind of framed it like this was an accident, that we are only just now finding out about this. I don't think so. I think that I think that we're just now finding out of this. I think the timing's a little bit too funny, because I want to say, because then, like a couple days before this article came out, this one, which I'll show up right now, came out on May 17th. Let me pull it up. And this is from Pirates and Princesses. This is a rumor website. Whoa, what was that?
Nothing,
Okay.
just a notification.
Okay. Now, I have to preface before showing this article that this is a rumor website, so please take this with a grain of salt. This is not fact, this is rumor. So that being said, this article, written by WDW Pro, who has been pretty reliable with his rumors in the past, came out on May 17th, 2021. And it says Kathleen Kennedy's tenure as the head of Lucasfilm may be coming to a close. And I'll just read this one real quick for you. Quietly, things have been shifting down at Lucasfilm and the Walt Disney Company. One might say the mood is different in the house that George Lucas built. It started with the dramatic cleanup of social media behavior by Lucasfilm employees. So if you don't remember, Michael, there was a period of, I want to say, at least a week and a half, where all Star Wars social media, YouTube, Twitter, I think Instagram, all of that went completely silent. And this could be what they're talking about with that. Then, despite the Herculean efforts it would take to get Indiana Jones 5 into production, which that's another topic, everything was thrown at making the movie a reality. The head of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, began scheduling appearances at the production of the movie along with her husband, Frank Marshall, in a way that isn't often seen for executive producers. Next, the bad news for Star Wars and Disney Plus began subtly leaking from Disney, certainly in a soft, coordinated manner. Kennedy is in the final year of her contract with the Walt Disney Company for presiding over the studio, largely all about Star Wars. Her tenure has been a bumpy one. While the immediate box office success with The Force Awakens and Rogue One was monumental, things excuse me, Things quickly devolved afterwards from a financial position. Whereas other Disney properties grew in popularity and economic importance, Star Wars began to diminish with the release of The Last Jedi. It was a steady drop until The Mandalorian. If you follow Star Wars, you probably read articles like the one above, which is this one right here. You know that there are people who defend Kathleen Kennedy and those who despise how she's performed. But the tenuous relationship she's had with Disney was ultimately frayed when Favreau demonstrated just how popular Star Wars can still be with The Mandalorian. And yet that was somewhat squandered with the mishandling of Gina Carano. Whatever your opinion of the actress, the way in which she was terminated from the company was a public relations nightmare. And yes, it was. Now, however, things are beginning to change behind the scenes. And then right here is a Variety quote that says, "Of these heads, Feige is seen as the most essential executive, having proved his mettle with the massive success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and streaming shows like WandaVision. After it was announced in 2019 that Feige would produce a Star Wars movie, there were rumors that he might assume more control of Lucasfilm. However, insiders say that Feige is fully committed with his Marvel duties and has no ambition to leave Lucasfilm or take more of a role." In the above quote from a Variety article by Brent Lang and Matt Donnelly, you'll notice the insiders they've spoken with are purposefully throwing Kathleen Kennedy as well as Pixar leaders under the proverbial bus. Kevin Feige, head of Marvel, is the real essential executive, they say. And while they heap praise on other Disney executives throughout their expose, Kennedy is essentially forgotten other than this throwaway mention. Her only reason for being included in the story is to say that Feige could have her job, except he doesn't want it. Now let's stop there for a minute. That sounds to me like they've actually had like Disney has had an actual conversation with Kevin Feige saying, "Hey, whenever Kathleen Kennedy leaves Lucasfilm, would you like to fill in her place?" So perhaps if that's true, Kathleen Kennedy's job security as head of Lucasfilm is not as secure as we thought it was. What do you think?
I would believe, in a way, yeah, that would be the case. Just because if there's one thing that Disney is very, you know, caring about, it's public relations. Just because even from the beginning of the Disney company, before they even thought of Star Wars, they were all about public relations. They were all about making themselves look the best, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If anything, it's what brought them to here and now, or even during the time of Walt Disney himself. It was all about good PR. And seeing as how a lot of bad PR happened with Gina Carano, like we said before, lover, hater, doesn't really matter. In this case, PR basically tanked after she was terminated. And
You're right.
so, and then I would guess I'd bring up another question of who exactly fired her, because a lot of articles would say it was Lucasfilm, but Lucasfilm, as we forget, is pretty much a corporate entity, meaning that's pretty much too broad to say. Like, we need to talk about, like, who individually fired her. Was it Dave Filoni? Was it Jon Favreau? Was it Kathleen Kennedy? Because those are the things that we're not being told, specifically about this incident, just because they want to solve this bad PR thing, but they're not willing to go to the direct source and the reason why it happened. At
You're
least in
right.
this example.
Not to mention, had you seen the Gina Carano interview that she did with Ben Shapiro?
Um, I was working on it, but I didn't get to watch it.
Okay. Well, for sure watch it, and I'm speaking to everyone that hasn't watched it. Go and watch it. It's really interesting. But one thing that she said was that she found out that she was let go from Lucasfilm the same way that we did, through social media and through places like Variety reporting that line that a Lucasfilm representative, anonymous, said Gina Carano is not under contract with Lucasfilm, nor is there any plans for her to be. Nevertheless, and I'm paraphrasing here, what she posted on the internet was absolutely bad.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know for sure who fired her, other than according to, assuming Gina is telling the truth, which we have no reason to assume that she's lying, that no one got in contact with her when they found out what she posted. No one pulled her in and said, "Hey, because of what you're doing, we have to let you go." She found out the same way that we did, over social media.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, even if, for the sake of devil's advocate, even if what she posted did deserve to be fired over, there are way, way, way more professional ways to go about that than, a social media post. In fact, I'm pretty sure there has to be some form of paperwork involved, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like something that can be just done overnight. Especially, at least in my opinion, I could be absolutely wrong about this, and that's totally fine. But because there is so much paperwork involved and so many other things that will impact this, such as the Rangers of the New Republic show, which was going to follow Cara Dune's character more closely,
Right,
and
but
then
now the production on that has been suspended indefinitely,
yeah,
which may as well be canceled, basically.
yeah, and it just really makes me think about, okay, what's really going on? Who's really at fault? Just because it's my personal opinion that because Gina Carano was fired, that they basically canceled the Rangers of the New Republic.
Right. And of course, ever since Gina Carano's got fired, the fan base as a whole has been very pissed off. And I'm sure you saw on Twitter the hashtag cancel Disney Plus was trending for quite a long time. And
Yeah,
hashtag cancel Disney Plus, hashtag we love Gina Carano, hashtag we love Cara Dune, etc., etc.
yeah,
And not only did they take her out of the show, but they scrubbed Cara Dune, the character, from all promotional artwork, all merchandise. They took her toys down from the shelves, and they tried their absolute hardest to erase her.
yeah,
But there's been reports of people being able to buy her merchandise again.
yeah,
So that's a whole nother conversation for another time. But for me personally, if there is a way that, for me, Gina Carano could return to play Cara Dune in The Mandalorian, I would like to see it. It's just a
yeah,
question of A, will Lucasfilm be willing to take her back? And B, will Gina Carano be willing to go back? Which we don't know what's in either of those parties' heads, so we can't say.
yeah.
So
And
getting back, go ahead, Mike.
yeah, and pretty much considering that we know absolutely nothing on like who or on who this quote unquote representative fired her, we can't really say for sure.
Right. So, anyways, getting off that tangent and getting back to the article. So, again, the only reason Kathleen Kennedy was included in that article was to say that Feige could have her job, except he doesn't want it. That lines up with what we've heard for the past years. We've heard for the past year that Disney would likely be amicable to some easy way to part with Miss Kennedy. But what's telling is that Variety is now putting that information out into the public sphere from their position as a trade publication. And make no mistake, Disney uses outlets like Variety to tip the industry as to where they'd like to go. If you listened to the second quarter earnings report held by Disney last week, as of the writing of this article, you may have noticed that they weren't thrilled with Disney Plus growth in mature markets. What are mature markets? Well, they're essentially places where Disney Plus has been launched longer than brand new geographical locations, given that Disney Plus is still a very new service. It's kind of fun to listen to Disney refer to mature markets. The biggest mature market is the United States, and that's also the place where Star Wars has by far the most significance. So, why do they call the US a mature market? The answer is because growth slowed to such an extent in the second quarter that they seem to be readjusting their expectations for the increase in subscribers. Privately, sources say that Disney knows they have a Star Wars problems. Subscribers began either slowing down or dropping after the Gina Carano situation, which we just talked about. The goodwill that was earned back for Star Wars via the Jon Favreau universe of storytelling was decimated by a mismanaged Lucasfilm. Perhaps worse, the following release of the High Republic line for Star Wars fiction was an utter failure. Consider the recent Star Wars material other than The Mandalorian. Star Wars Resistance, despite what Variety said, was a flop. Star Wars Galaxy Adventures was mocked vociferously. I think that's how you say it. The High Republic is perhaps the worst ever received content since a certain holiday special. Video coming for that later. The
Yeah.
Bad Batch has launched to lackluster excitement. Is there any buzz? If there's one thing that will get people like Bob Chapek to make big decisions quickly, Bob Chapek, Michael, by the way, is the incoming CEO for Disney. And if there's one thing to get people like him to make big decisions quickly, it's declining stock prices. And there's no better way to drive down Disney stock at the moment than to fail on delivering subscriber increasing Disney Plus content. Now, here's the important part. Does all of this mean that Kathleen Kennedy is most assuredly exiting the role she's held since before Disney purchased Lucasfilm? Not necessarily. We could see Kennedy get a 1 year limited extension. It's also possible she could be bumped to a legacy role, but financially, it no longer seems feasible for Disney to keep her on board, and her latest endeavor continues to trend upwards. Now we're going to stop there for a minute because the rest of the article goes into talking about Indiana Jones 5 and the problems they're having with getting that.
Hey, PJ, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you okay? Because it seems like you're having audio problems. You're kind of like going in and out with your mic.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Just for a minute, you were kind of going in and out, kind of warbling or something.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea what that was. If I was moving my head forward and backward from the microphone, I didn't notice. I was too busy reading the article.
Okay. So, anyways, continue.
So, real quick, let's get caught up on some of the comments here. Patrick sent in two that said Gina's episode of Running Wild was allowed back to the lineup, and we saw the episode on Nat Geo a few days ago. That's right. That's another thing that they canceled right after they let go of Gina Carano. She was supposed to be on an episode of Bear Grylls Running Wild, which you meant to say here, but she was supposed to be on an episode of that, but then when she got fired, that episode was originally pulled until it wasn't pulled anymore and it was allowed to air. And and this I found out from Gina Carano herself on Twitter, and according to what I've been hearing in rumors, Bear Grylls like really went to bat for her and talked about how much he enjoyed, her as a person and how nice she was to try and get that episode back aired. And also, just real quick, shout out to Mr. Felix Kiros. How are you, sir? Thank you for watching. We had actually a pretty cool conversation the other day on Discord. That was really nice. So, again, thank you for watching, sir. So back to the question that I was going to ask before we had those audio issues, Mike. Everything that you've heard so far from this article, just like what's your immediate thoughts on it?
So, let's see. Well, when we were talking about how Gina Carano's merchandising was being pulled and how all that was pretty much just canceled,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much this entire thing has been affecting pretty much everything Lucasfilm has to offer.
You're welcome, bud.
And then, yeah, he says, no problem. It kind of makes you think, like, what's going to happen for Mandalorian Season 3, where pretty much at this point, his character, Cara Dune, is pretty much a well-established character. Like, they have to do something. Kind of like how...
hold on. We got a special guest in here. We got a special guest. So, folks, just real quick before I bring this gentleman on, as I always do with these live streams, I have put out the StreamYard link to the Jedi Master member community of Echo Base Network, because we are Jedi Masters of that community also. And so just to get like an extra point of view into whatever we're talking about, I'll invite people from that community onto our stream also. And we just had a person from that community join us. So please say hello to Mr. Eddie Gannon. How are you, sir?
Oh, good. How are you guys doing?
We are
good.
Doing very well.
Thank you for joining the stream.
Yeah, thank you, man. Also, I like seeing the guitar there right next to you. What kind of guitar is that?
Yeah, it's a Fender orchestral.
Mm-hmm.
It's an orchestral.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty nice. I got one back here behind me too. Let me grab it real quick. So this one, I don't know if you've seen this before. It's an Ovation guitar. And what's cool about these is that they have the round back and sides.
Yeah. I've actually had one before, this one.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
So they're pretty I find the round backs a lot more useful than like the general semi-acoustics, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But great guitar, there's no doubt about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Eddie, what we were just talking about before you came on, I don't know how much of the stream you heard before coming in here, but we were reacting.
I didn't hear none of it.
Okay. So just to get you caught up to speed, we were reading this Pirates and Princess article talking about how Kathleen Kennedy, according to them, could very well be on her way out of Lucasfilm. We brought up, the various, we'll say, bumpy ride that she's had as president of Lucasfilm, and how badly since The Last Jedi anything Disney Star Wars has been received. Talking about how Kevin Feige, according to this quote, has been offered the idea to come in and run Lucasfilm, but he said no because he's fully committed to his Marvel duties. And so my question for you, sir, is what do you think of all these rumors that Kathleen Kennedy is leaving? Do you think it's going to happen, or do you think this is all wishful thinking?
It could be a little bit of both, I think. Like it's very very interesting how things will play out through the course, like between now and October, as the rumored date of her leaving. Is that correct?
Yes. This article said that she. Let me find it. It says right here, Kennedy is in the final year of her contract with the Walt Disney Company for presiding over the studio, largely all about Star Wars. And I've also heard further discussion about this from other YouTube channels saying that specifically around October is when her contract comes up, and it's May now. So we still have a couple. So we still have a couple months at the soonest before we hear anything for sure.
Interesting.
And that's also plenty of time between now and October for Disney and Kathleen Kennedy to negotiate some sort of renewed contract. But do you think they'll actually do that?
Well, hopefully, um, most certainly. Like I hope like that comes into play. But as I say, like I mean, it's hard to say at this point. Like what's going to like I don't want to kind of jump at it and say, well, I have to be kind of reserved.
Yeah. Admitted.
Um,
Go ahead, bud.
yeah, so I I would hope that things go to plan, and they usher in possibly Filoni if he's willing to take up the mantle.
Right.
Um, and I mean, it's positive things like coming ahead. Like I mean, we know the tenure that Miss Kennedy had, um, most certainly, and it's been a difficult road for all the Star Wars fans.
Yeah. Also, real quick, Eddie Felix says hello.
Hey, Felix.
I like the
Yeah.
comment that you said, Eddie, about how you are very reserved about information like this because admittedly, I at least try to be very reserved or cautiously optimistic about this also because this is not the first time we've heard rumors that Kathleen Kennedy is going to be let go of Lucasfilm. Heck, we've been hearing these rumors ever since The Last Jedi came out and people didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
But like I kind of alluded to before when we were talking about the news that Dave Filoni got promoted to executive creative director, but we're only just now finding out about that. The timing of us finding out about that news combined with that article we just read coming out and these rumors sort of resurfacing, that's a very, very, very interesting coincidence, if that's a coincidence at all. So there could be something more to this, and we'll just have to wait and see. So, with that being said, let's continue on with the article, and we're going to sort of shift gears a little bit away from Star Wars and talk about Indiana Jones, because that was another thing that Miss Kennedy announced back in December was that we were going to be getting Indiana Jones 5. So, let's scroll back to that. We're now hearing from sources and from public reports that Indiana Jones 5 is again running behind schedule. Whereas the movie was supposed to be shooting this spring, we're now finding out that the movie is still filling in casting holes. The movie is now reportedly scheduled not to shoot with Harrison Ford until August at the earliest and may actually shoot after Guardians of the Galaxy 3 begins, considering one injury to Ford could end the entire movie for good. The effort and money being thrown at the film is quite the gamble. And if Indiana Jones 5 can't make it to theaters by its latest release date of July 29th, 2022, you could potentially be looking at a release date where Harrison Ford is closer to 81 years old. Now, if he's going to be nearly 81 years old in 2022, he's got to be at least 79 right now. And if he can still make an Indiana Jones movie at 79, if he feels like he can do it, then ultimately who are we to stop him as far as I'm concerned? But you could tell in The Force Awakens, even playing Han Solo, he was struggling a little bit with the more action-packed scenes. Like, you guys remember the scene where he and Chewie were running away from those gangsters on the big cargo ship that had the monsters on it. And he looked like he was really struggling to run. So Indiana Jones is arguably a much, much more physical role than Han Solo was. So Could we?
Yeah.
So, do we really want to see someone that's in their late 70s to 80s running around swinging a bullwhip, shooting a gun, and getting in fistfights? Or do you think it's time for the story just to end with Indiana Jones 4? And Felix says, "Man, I am feeling old now."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, Michael, I'll start with you on this one.
So, first off, I think it would be appropriate to pretty much commend Ben Harrison Ford's commitment to not only Star Wars, but also Indiana Jones in his career and relationship to Lucasfilm, purely just because he's well aware of what these roles are going to require, but he's going to do it anyway. So I think it's appropriate for us to commend him for that at first. And then second off, for his role in Indiana Jones, I was honestly thinking to myself, now why couldn't they just get a stunt person to do this? Just because obviously it would be much safer for him to do so, for them to do that, and then have Harrison Ford himself do like voice lines or any sort of close-ups during an action scene that wouldn't necessarily require a stunt double.
Yeah.
So,
and they certainly could at least afford to hire stunt doubles.
Yeah.
But the question of will they, I don't know. And even if they do use stunt doubles, they can't use stunt doubles for everything. Harrison Ford, in like the really close-up shots of the action, he's gonna have to get physical to some degree. Like if you remember, even in Indiana Jones 4, he was still doing the fist fights himself.
Yeah.
So can he still do that in this movie? And if not, then, why are they even making this movie?
Yeah. Well, maybe this will be more of a passing of the torch movie, kind of like the last movie was kind of alluding to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for this movie, it'll serve the purposes of it's time. It's time for a new guy.
Yeah. What do you think, Eddie?
Here's a question for you. Well, now it's just like based upon the last movie, would you think Shia LaBeouf will take the mantle?
Would Shia LaBeouf have taken the mantle? Honestly, I would say no. I think both in the story and in real life, Shia LaBeouf would not have replaced Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. In fact, they even hinted this at the very, very end of the movie, like the last second. You remember Shia LaBeouf has Indiana Jones' hat in his hand and tries to put it on, but then Indy snatches it right out and then, puts it on himself, which is a funny
Not
moment.
Today, kids.
Exactly. And that's a funny moment, but I think that also says more that there's only ever going to be one Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Like,
to be fair, Harrison, he's getting on a bit, and if he can play the role, like especially like given his age, more power to him. But certainly, I would hope that possibly a mantle will be passed on. And let's go.
Well,
if again, I have to be kind of reserved and see how the movie plays out.
Right. And that is assuming the movie even happens at all, because it's been pushed back so far.
Yeah.
That it's almost like, why are we even bothering at this point?
Yeah. You think about what happened in The Mule. Like, for example, I don't know whether you've seen that movie.
I have not.
It was Clint Eastwood's movie.
Yep.
With Bradley Cooper.
Yeah.
Very brilliant movie. It was basically bringing certain things to I think drug lords to from the Colombian community from one state to the next. and that's pretty much the whole premise. But I mean, and that's just a kind of quick kind of summation of it. But a fascinating movie, brilliant, and well deserved in the award winning category. But as regards to like going back to Harrison's role, if he can do it, like more power to him. And I've
Right,
got like I'd have great respect
right.
for
I guess
someone.
all we're saying here is please be careful, Mr. Ford. That's pretty much all I'm saying. If you can
Yeah,
do it, if you think you can do it, please then absolutely I'll watch it, but just please be careful. And then real quick, Mr. Felix says Indiana Jones and the Quest of the Bengay Cream. Let's hope that's not what it turns out. Also, real quick, Michael had to leave. He had something else he had going on, so we won't be streaming for much longer, but we'll at least finish this conversation we're having, Eddie. One thing that you mentioned that piqued my interest was the idea of passing the torch passing the torch from Indy to someone else. And I think this movie very well could be that, but I don't think it should be just anyone. I think it has to be the right person. And the only other person that we know is at least rumored to be cast for this movie is Miss Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And for those that don't know who that is, she played the droid L3 in Solo. And L3, as I'm sure you saw in my Solo review, is one of my least favorite Star Wars characters, and she is very well known for pushing the woke agenda. So I'm hoping that if she's even in this movie at all, that it's not her basically stealing the show from Harrison and taking charge, where we come to see Indiana Jones. We don't want to see Indiana Jones be given a back seat to some woman we've never seen before, you know?
yeah. It's yeah. I mean, like that. I mean, if they're gonna do that, then like it's not worth being watchable. I think.
Right.
Um, I mean, like they like I don't understand. Like what I mean, what why like the woke agenda in the first place?
I wish I had the answer.
Yeah,
I I genuinely wish I had the answer on that one.
well, I mean,
But
it's like it's a powerful franchise, and like I mean, there's fans that has supported Indiana Jones for a long time,
right.
and if they go this route, I don't think it'll last much longer.
Yeah, especially given that Indiana Jones 4, as far as the general audience is concerned, was not really that popular of a movie. Now, personally, I don't mind it, but I'll admit I'm somewhat more forgiving with movies in general. But I could certainly see where other people wouldn't like it. And yeah, some of the CGI they used in that movie just was kind of goofy. Like, for example, the shot of Shia LaBeouf swinging through the trees with the monkeys. That that just seemed like a little bit too much.
Yeah, like you say, I don't really mind it. Um, like it's I actually enjoyed the movie. But it was yeah, it was a lot of kind of corny type of
Right.
things in it. But I mean, like it had a good story. It was and like I mean, a lot of these Indiana Jones movies, they're actually based on archaeological, excuse me, archaeological finds
Right.
that they have found through the course of time.
Right. Like, for example,
Look,
the first one was the Ark of the Covenant, which at least the people of the Christian faith and the Jewish faith, we know that that actually exists.
yeah,
And then the one in Temple of Doom, it was those little stones.
yeah,
And then in the Last Crusade, there's the Holy Grail, which was a big item of interest in early medieval times.
That's right.
And I know a lot of people didn't like this aspect, but personally, I didn't mind the idea that basically what they're going for in Indiana Jones 4, the Crystal Skull, was basically the remains of an alien. I thought that
Yeah.
was actually pretty cool.
Yeah. It was actually found along the Nile.
Really?
Yeah, I was like they done a documentary on the Discovery Channel, and
Okay.
they found it. I believe it was just outside the Egyptian remains. You know where the Sphinx and
At Giza?
Giza. Yeah,
Yes.
and they like it was interesting the way they kind of twisted it to reveal it in Panama, which is
Okay.
basically the Aztec uh, what do you call it, the Aztec civilization.
Right. So yeah, so speaking of that, just kind of getting on a side topic, I wonder what if Indiana Jones 5 does happen, I wonder what sort of artifact they could possibly have him go this time, because not only have we had him go after the various artifacts in those movies that we've seen, but I remember in the game Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings that he was going after in that game was actually Moses' staff, the one that he used to part the Red Sea and then throw down in Pharaoh's court, and it became a snake. So personally, I know people are going to disagree with me on this one, but personally, what if Indiana Jones possibly went after the cross that Jesus was crucified on?
That should be interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. But who knows? Again, there's like we just read in that article, it's been pushed back so much that it's going to take a while before we even see anything at all, if we see something. So I think that's where we're going to end the stream right there. I'm sure Michael would have something very nice to say about you guys watching. I appreciate everyone watching. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Eddie, for joining us. This was a very
you're,
great conversation.
you're very welcome, and it's always a pleasure.
Oh, no problem. So yeah, we will see you guys later. Not sure yet what our next videos are going to be about, but I know for sure that I've mentioned before that I'm going to get caught up on the Clone Wars because I've never seen that all the way through. And so I think that's going to be the next big review project for me, at least, is watching the Clone Wars all the way through. So there will be videos coming out for that. I'm probably going to do it where I review each season as a whole. And of course, with the Clone Wars movie, I'll lump that into season one. So make sure to hit like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of that. And we will see you guys later. Thank you.